Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over a Chinese professional game between Youyin and Chen Yiming. And I picked this game because it's got a lot of really good examples of how to use leftover aji or potential in situations, and there's a really great sort of invasion sequence that Black pulls off in the middle game fighting, which I think has a lot of interesting aspects to it. So this is just kind of a, I think, standard, kind of league game between two, fairly low-ranking professionals. I've never heard of either of these players before. There's nothing, particularly amazing about either of them from what I can tell. They're just, young, new professionals, and this is an excellent game. So let's get started. We see a lot of, it's almost rare to see all four opening stones on the 3-4 point. White often would play the star point here, or would have played the star point here. This is, pretty classic, and it's a very slow opening, because white here is giving black the option to just enclose again. And the reason, typically we would think, or it's generally thought in terms of opening theory, that allowing black to get two enclosures is just too good. So typically, instead of enclosing here, white will usually approach or do something. It's also feasible to play a splitting move, but do something to prevent black's development at this point. But the logic that white is using here is that if black simply encloses, this point on the lower side between these two facing enclosures is really big. So white's saying, if we look at the open spaces on the board right now, this is definitely the biggest. White can still split. A move on the side is big, and white could likewise look to enclose or, consolidate the side in some way. But the thing to notice here is that all of these moves other than one are a little smaller. So the splitting move would be good, but it's not as urgent as this, point on the bottom. For example, if white does play a move to split the side over here, black will happily take this point. And likewise, if white does anything else, if white encloses, black will take this point. And you should be able to see how with this enclosure facing this point is bigger than this point, because this point is facing this low stone of black's, so it's a smaller extension for both sides. The black stone reduces white's potential, and because the black stone is low, black doesn't have potential himself over here. So in this case, white is saying, hey, if you do take your second enclosure, I get the last big point of the, early opening. And typically it's thought that if you get the last point of the certain, tier of moves that you're on, that's good, because you got a point in your opponent, a bigger point than your opponent's going to be able to get. So that's white's thinking. So black, black doesn't directly enclose, but plays a larger framework move. And this is obviously super big because, compared to the Chinese opening where black would just have one stone on the star point, having this enclosure, this is a really good extension from this enclosure, and it's, white is going to have trouble coming in now because this stone is acting as like a preemptive pincer on a potential white move here. Like, this stone is already pincered, so black can just, attack it. So, this is an interesting idea. White comes here to, this is pretty standard. If black just encloses, white will jump, and this is a pretty tight extension, but this star point stone works very well as an extension from this, especially with this stone closing off the lower side. So this is looking like it could easily become white territory along the bottom. And basically here, it's black has got a framework, white has got a framework, so this is definitely a fine opening for white. Instead, black comes and shoulder hits immediately, and basically, the black has a plan, and that's that black wants to develop the lower right. So black's not worried about giving white development facing the lower left. Black is going to commit to get this lower right area and then maybe try to invade or reduce over here. And we can see pretty straightforward sequence. This is important timing to kind of ruin black's shape here, because if white does this right away, this would maybe be feasible. The logic being that, well, all you're doing is forcing black to take fifth line territory, so this one stone might not be super important. And of course, with this thick shape down here, black could also resist. So black has a lot of good options here. In fact, I think this would be better by far, because these white stones are weak. So, this point is very urgent, which is why white pushes once on the bottom. Because now, if black tries to, dominate the center, that just doesn't work, because white can just come through here and damage this stone. So now, like, either black has no influence but could maybe live in the corner, or white's going to take a huge corner while black gets some influence, and that's just not acceptable. So black has to come back and protect, and this gives white, much better shape on the edge than if black had been able to descend at 03. Now, this is an interesting sequence because it looks right in the way this plays out, okay, which is what white was expecting when white attached under here, that this is kind of just a loss for white. White loses the stone at Q2, loses the stone at Q4, and the one thing that you should note is that this stone at Q4 has a lot of aji, because of potential Ataris involving these two stones. So it is it looks like white attached, lost the attaching stone, and gave up the corner and didn't really get anything. And that's not exactly true. So, black is getting the most here. But you should realize that this is actually a fairly serious defect in black's shape. And that will come into play later in the game. So, basically, like I said, black had a plan, developed the lower right, black succeeded. White said, I've got this wall that I'm building towards my Shamari, that is great for me too. So this is a situation where I think both players are satisfied. Black got what he wanted, and white was able to develop the lower side on a pretty large scale. So white extends here, which is a good balance. It's like makes good shape here. We've got the wall here, and this also indirectly protects against a lot of these like potential push and cut. Is not as severe with this stone back here. So another thing to consider. And black does something really natural, which is just play out at the fulcrum of the two frameworks. So if black does something else here, like just, comes over here. It's interesting to look at, what happens when white plays here instead in terms of the center. And I'm not saying that white should necessarily ignore this approach to do this, but now black's framework is definitely just limited to the right side. White's the one who is looking to expand the framework now. So now we can see white's framework is much larger. So, and actually much better than something like this with the on-board position would be a pincer to pincer the stone while expanding the framework. But in any event, so black expands, which is very good. Now, for example, before when white was able to play on the left side to expand the framework with the white stone here, now black can play somewhere an extension on the top to expand the framework. So trying to take the side and the center at the same time, which would be a really good move. So white immediately comes in to reduce, and this is a really light style that white has here, because you play this move and you think, oh, maybe I should push in, try and because now if black comes here, maybe turn, I don't know what black will do, but I maybe just keep this really fight in here really hard, and white just jumps way back to here, saying, what, you can even spend a move to take that stone, but you can't cleanly get rid of all the aji in one more move. So I'm just going to fall back, expand from my corner, and now a white enclosure over here would be really big, so black comes directly to prevent that enclosure, because with the extension here, a white enclosure in this corner would be huge. And also, how we mentioned at the beginning that, allowing black to get two enclosures is considered a little slow, a little suboptimal. Likewise, letting white get 2 enclosures is not any better, especially since black should theoretically have the initiative in the first move. So we can see that this preventing this enclosure becomes a very urgent point for black. And black, again, has, a fairly light style himself, it's looking more to attack these 2 stones on top than necessarily protect this stone to the death. But this allows black to more or less connect here, and white to connect up likewise. So it's a pretty fair result, and like I said, this move looked to attack these stones, so that's what black is going to do now, is put as much pressure as he can. So here we have a little bit of a trade. Black does a lot of damage to the shape, but white is able to, more or less manage because, black has to take a move here to seal off the territory on the right, which allows white to connect back up. So, black gets a lot of territory from this. We can kind of see, this white move is a probing type of situation to see how white can get out of this. And when black comes here, white realizes, oh, okay, I can get eye shape and connect all my stones over here. So black's going to take territory, I'm going to survive. That's fair. So now black decides to come in here, and when I mentioned that invasion sequence at the beginning, this is the sequence that I was talking about. And basically, when you're looking at a big area like this, that's in white is really strong here because there's no real weaknesses in white shape, and these stones over here are strong and low. So white kind of has all the advantages in this fight. There's not really anything black can, depend on. If black had a stone here instead, there would be like kind of a home base to run to. But with the white being strong over here, and with the small knight's enclosure, I mean, even if this were a large knight's enclosure, black would have much more room for activity. But as it stands, black doesn't have much. So white just descends to say, no base on the side. You're going to have to do things in the center. And now black is basically going to play very lightly, and white's going to play very aggressively. Like, white would not think about defending here because white's so strong around here that white can go all out with this attack. Hence the move on the outside to keep black from escaping, rather than to defend the corner in the side by playing something like c6. Now, black, these 2 moves are kind of crazy. Like, if you just see these 2 moves, you're like, what is black going to do? And black is going to say, I don't actually care about those stones. I'm actually just reducing here at h7. I'm not invading deeply. After all, haha, joke's on you. We're just going to, take a chunk out of the lower side. But white's not having any of it. And admittedly, to just defend, like, this is just kind of behind enemy lines here, So white's going to attack. And when you're really strong, this is what you need to do. You need to go all out in your attack. And now this is an interesting move because, we know that this doesn't really do anything. White can come down, can connect against the Atari, and, it's annoying, but, black wants to make sure this Aji is there, because if black ignores this to do something out here, and then at some point, tries to come over here, and white just protects it, playing something that's, attacking the stones, like, that's no good. So it's important for black to, play this cut here, because it's important right now, so it's definitely Sente, and it preserves some Aji, because black has this Atari, and, potentially, even if you're not going to save these 2 stones, maybe now this move is Sente, and white has to play this, and now this was important to get an eye. So it gives black a little bit of Aji that might come in handy at some point. Now black presses here, and now this is actually a pretty severe threat against the corner, so white has to respond. And now black is just kind of coming out, and the important thing about this invasion so far is that it's very light. Like, if white wants to right now, white can do this to kill the F3 stone. And that's going to be like, okay, there's no more coming out with this F3 stone, it's dead, white took territory. But black doesn't care about any one of these stones that he's played in white's framework. He's just trying to get a little bit of a foothold and then escape. So this is a really nice sequence by black to make use of all of the, points that white's going to have to respond at to, try to make something, try to reduce white's territory. So white comes back, continuing to attack. And here, for example, this is another, really big thing, is like, black plays this attachment, white hanes. Now, if white wants to, white can Atari and probably capture the stone, but black doesn't care about the stone. Black just needs to escape. So if white goes to Atari the stone, black will just extend and push out with this stone. And even if white gets the chance to come back and do something like this, and black has to give up these two stones, it's not really a big deal, because, yeah, white took the two stones, but the main thing is we're still reducing, we're still fighting our way out. So, this is an important part of the game, because if white got this whole quarter of the board, the game would be over. So it's important for black to reduce this in a major way. And we can see here, white does actually Atari the stone. Like, black counter hanes, which is a cool tactical idea, mostly when you're willing to give away the original stone. And now, black comes out with a tiger's mouth, which is pretty cool. Now, white, of course, is immediately able to Atari it, but, it's better than nothing, for sure. And then white even has to come back and defend these two stones so that black doesn't just kill them and make two eyes. So this seems to be going pretty well for black, but at the same time, white did get a Panuki facing this black area, which is a little thin. This is not a strong connection between these two stones. And this black group is not yet alive, so white is looking forward to attacking more. And we'll see here, white throws this in. I think there's a little bit of concern with black coming through here, or doing this and coming down, being able to push and sente. But if black ignores this, it's really big, and it removes all this aji in here, so black actually responds by taking that. This is a good forcing timing for white. And now white comes in and says, like, you're not all connected here. Let me see what I can cut off. And sure enough, we get some back and forth, and, black manages to maintain the threat of actually connecting all the stones, but, and white has to protect out here, which increases the thickness towards these black jumps, which are just a little thin. Black comes back to connect, does so, no eye shape, but black is connected. And now it gets a little dire. Black comes back to make an eye, manages to do it in sente, because white protects here, and then black comes down to try and get the second eye over here. And black is able to, just because there's just a little bit too much going on here. So black actually takes advantage of all the aji, and now white does something that looks crazy, invades all the way here and attaches, and this is an excellent example of a probing move, okay? And white's going to actually activate some more aji over here, and the reason is that there's, the way this looks over here is that it's very likely to be a ko at some point. If black is able to do this, this looks like there's an important ko. So this is kind of making ko threats in a way. But the other thing that is important is after this exchange, we know what black is going to do. So let's get back to the game, and I'll explain what I mean when the focus shifts a little bit. So, these two moves impact this white cut. And now, once white has cut here, the thinking is maybe black would rather have this stone at S9. Maybe it would be better to have that stone here. Or maybe it would have been better to Atari and then extend. But unfortunately, we don't have those options because we already decided that descending here was the best way to answer the attachment. So this is kind of the idea behind a probing move, is that you're sort of fixing the Aji in stone. Like, before you play, before white, let's just go back, before white plays any of these probing moves in the inside, there's Aji in here. There's moves white can play, obviously white has these Ataris against the two stones. White has attachments against this stone. If white's willing to give up these three, maybe this Atari is interesting, and then a shoulder hit, hoping to maybe tie these stones together. There's a lot of different things that white can do. So the idea of Aji, or potential, in a position is really hard to pin down. It's very amorphous, like, you don't know what it's going to be. And so we play probing moves, like, once we get the idea. Like, white definitely wants to do something about this black area. But white needs to know which of those potential situations is going to happen. So white probes and says, okay, you're going to descend and then cut. I'm just going to leave this now, because now I know 100% that if I do something over here and I need an Atari here, I have it. If I need an Atari here, I have it. So if I can read a sequence knowing this is Sente. Before white plays anything over here, whether or not white's going to get the stone is really up in the air. So it's hard to make plans and have a specific idea of which point you want to invade on until you know where your future Sente moves are going to be, how your opponent's going to resolve the Aji. And that's essentially the point of this sequence that white plays in here, is just to see where the moves are. So that now white has a more concrete plan. I'm going to push here and cut, because I know I have this Atari in Sente. So, if black had answered in a different way, white might have come up with a different sequence than this push and cut. Now, black extends, and then white comes in over here. And so we can see that white's not even necessarily 100% going to, link up with these stones, but the fact that these stones are here and have some potential forcing moves makes this reduction a lot more intimidating, because there's potentially much nastier follow-ups for white in this area. So for example, without having these stones back here, black may not have needed a move here and might have just reinforced these stones over here, which are coming under very severe attack. This is interesting. White does not capture the three stones, but pushes out here to continue making use of the Aji left behind. And this is an interesting exchange, because now these three stones that were captured have come back to life, and these two white stones have been captured, but white has gotten a few more moves over on the side here, and really does a lot of damage with this. So this area that was black's territory has pretty much collapsed in a lot of ways. Like, it's not clear that black's going to get very many points over here at all. On the other hand, black gets to connect here, and these white dumpling here is in kind of a rough spot. So black gets a good attack on these cornerstones, which, I mean, even a few moves ago, it seems like, well, white can capture here or cut here, and, this corner is probably going to be white's. But now, it's like, oh man, what's happening? And, black connects back out with this group to make sure, because this is only one eye, so, that's kind of important. And then this is interesting right here, because when I first reviewed this game, I was like, why did white do that? That just doesn't seem like, of all the times to go back and capture the stone. Why right now? It really fascinated me. It took me a little while to figure out why. And one of the reasons is because this white group, once black solidly connects out here, and even going back a few moves, we can see white becomes concerned. So that when black plays this becomes very weak. So white has to do something. So this helps it get eye shape, but once it's connected here, it needs to kind of be able to connect to these stones. And the aji of this black stone coming out becomes really unbearable when you're desperately trying to connect through here, and it causes white a lot of problems. So it helps the connection right here, like the connection between the L8 stone and the H9 stone becomes much stronger with this extra liberty that's created when white captures. So it has a direct tactical significance, but it also eliminates a ton of co-threats. So if white plays something that just connects, and there's a co later, and I think white has read that there is going to be a ko in this corner, because white can capture, black recaptures, white plays here, and black's going to want to extend, and that creates a ko situation to that's very important to the life and death in the corner. And so basically, knowing that there's this ko coming up, white finds this all-purpose move that helps the connection and removes several large ko threats from black. So we can see white took a lot of these stones and very much reduced this, what looked like a very large black area, to a fairly small one. White presses here, which threatens an eye, which is important because this group is not quite, it's basically alive. There's not really a way for black to break the eye here. But now, another thing to notice is that these white stones are coming under severe attack now. And with this black group connected back and capturing these white stones, this black group is alive. So black can kind of go all out on this attack. And we can see here that this is kind of a big ko. So, and well, it becomes a very big ko when black presses here, which destroys white's eye shape. So white can't get two eyes in the local area anymore, because basically if white tries to make an eye here, this makes it false, because eventually, you know, black will be able to come here and white will have to fill. So black comes here, which threatens the life and death of this entire white group, and threatens it via ko. And this is actually a kind of an interesting ko structure, because basically black can't connect at both of these situations. So black has to win the ko and connect at B16, just because, for example, this doesn't really help, because now we just have another ko over here. So it remains ko regardless. And black can't ignore this situation, because if black just, you know, takes a, you know, big endgame point, then this becomes essentially a double ko for white. So now if black makes a ko threat, and I don't even know what, maybe something like this, then white can just respond to it, and then when black retakes this, white retakes this. And since white can win either of these kos and get two eyes by connecting, if white connects at B17, white has 2 or 3 eyes rather, and if white connects at B15, there's 2 eyes. So there's no way for black to win this situation. Which means black's going to play a ko-threat, threaten to kill these stones instead. White can't allow that, so white threatens to connect and or live, depending on what black wants. And you'll notice that black has to connect at b16 to resolve the Cove situation and kill the stones. It's the only way in this circumstance. And it's important to, analyze that when you're getting into a Cove, because sometimes connecting is best, other times there's a follow-up move that is better. So white uses a local co-threat, which is all well and good. Black continues to threaten this group. And now you'll notice that, the connection is one option, and white can also connect here, which is Sente, because black has to connect here or lose the 2 stones, and then connect here to make 2 eyes, barely. Another local co-threat, and notice that this is a co-threat not because it threatens the 3 stones, because it threatens to connect to the group that's in danger. So basically, if black doesn't allow this, then it's why am I trying to attack these stones in the first place? And here we see, black cuts, so white presses and still has 2 options, to cut and kill, to connect, or to make 2 eyes. White comes down here, which again is a local co-threat, threatening to push and cut, which would capture the 3 stones, which saves the big group that black is trying to attack. So these are all. This is an excellent co-threat because it's defending territory while threatening to save the group. So white does very well there. And now white puts this Aji left over down here into action. And notice that if black responds to this, probably the best response is just to capture here. White can recapture, but white has another co-threat here. Black will have to connect. And I don't know, that's the only clear one, but those are 2 really big co-threats. And normally this type of chasing your opponent in a faux ladder is bad, but here it's entirely inside black's strong area that's already black's territory. So when black has to play a move inside his own territory to keep from getting captured, it's not hurting us. If this were moving towards an open area of the board, this would be a terrible, terrible co-threat right here. Just expanding black's dominance over an open area of the board like this would be really awful for white. But since this is black's territory already, black is forced to play a stone inside. It's not working out, essentially. But black doesn't have the co-threats to keep up with this, so black actually fills here, which is huge. Don't get me wrong, capturing all these stones and taking the corner is pretty massive. But white gets to capture 4 stones here, and this is pretty much equally large. I know it looks bigger, that, because this is a lot of stones, but, white destroys basically all of black's area on the right in the course of events that leads to losing this, and it just seems like white was able to manage the exchanges a little bit better. And remember that white didn't just get this, white got a lot of reducing and capturing up here as well. And, maybe it's because, so many of white's points come from captured stones, that their territory doesn't look as big, but notice that white's captured 18 stones to white's 8, or black's 8. So, white has 10 more points in captures. So, with Comey, it's looking pretty good for white so far. White has to come back and live. And now we're pretty much just in endgame. This 1-point jump is really big, and it has a big follow-up too. Like, white's really threatening to take a lot of the corner. And, yeah, see, like this is a big, that might have been a misstep by black to not answer that, because is that necessary? This may have been necessary to prevent a situation where black has to go and actually remove these stones from the board. Let's see here. Let's imagine that black blocks. What's white's big follow-up over here? Does this prevent an eye? No. Maybe something like this? Yeah. So, this would be a problem, because with only one eye, when these liberties start to get filled up, black's gonna have to come back and fill the liberties of the white group. And that becomes really problematic, because black's gonna have to play this move that we just played here, but to look at them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 if white does something, but let's just say 6 points in here, while white just fills up these outside liberties. And that's going to reduce this territory by all 6 of those points that black has to fill. So that's pretty painful. And at this point in the endgame, 6 points is actually quite a bit. So maybe black just doesn't quite have time. Maybe this is slightly bigger in sort of, this would be like reverse Sente, essentially. So that's a pretty big, and now like with this territory, these are all points down here too, without having to remove those. It's really easy. So, but this is pretty big for white as well. And there's not too much else. See, and white even gets to reduce this area on the side down to almost nothing. This isn't actually a ko right here, because basically with the external, if these external liberties were not there, this would be important, because let's go, in a situation like this, black can play here and then capture the 2 stones. So you know, it's not it's not a problem for black. But if all these external liberties were closed up and this was self-Atari and white could capture here, then obviously it would be a problem. So it's a situation that's only dangerous for black when they don't have any external liberties. And here's an interesting situation, and a good lesson, is that when you have a ko situation, and especially in the middle game or end game, and you're the first one to capture, go ahead and capture it first, even if you're planning on connecting. Because basically, even if you're saying, like, hey, I don't have the ko threats, I'm just going to connect here, everything's going to be fine, capture it once, because now black has to burn a ko threat somewhere in order to take it back. And now you just play whatever defensive move you were going to anyway, but you've made black waste 1 ko threat to take that back. Just, it's a small thing, but, you know, it could be important in a game to make your opponent waste a ko threat at some point. And by just capturing it once, and you'll often see this in higher level play, you know, whether it's worth fighting the ko or not, the player will capture it the first time just to make their opponent use a ko threat and recapture it before coming back to defend like white did here. And see now, you know, there's just a little bit of logic. So these 2 stones we played, you know, not ever having any idea that we would eventually break through and have, you know, capture part of this wall. Now, you know, we're getting this little forcing move out of it at the end of the game, which is worth something. So, and small endgame now. Not too much of interest at this point. Little pokes, and we're pretty much, there we go. And at the end, white won this game by 3.5 points. So definitely good positional judgment in terms of the exchanges made. This, you know, this white corner became dominated by black. Black got a lot of territory up here. What looked like black's moyo from the beginning of the game, and actually pretty solid territory, got decimated by white. This area over here, which looked like it was going to be most of the quarter of the board at one point, got reduced to basically, you know, 3rd line territory. Like, there's just a lot of pairs of 2 points in here. And, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting game, particularly with black's attacking style, or invading style over here was really instructive on, like, how to be light and not pay too much attention to any one stone. And notice that even after not paying attention to any of those stones, he managed to connect them all and make them live, later on. But the success of the invasion was based on the light play. And then White's powerful positional judgment in being able to play here to eliminate the co-threats, seeing that this was likely to become co up here, and then you know, having, you know, playing the excellent probing moves of his own to set up for this co-threat that was able to destroy